This week for Fallout Friday, we have our Armored Dogmeat model. This is from the XO1 Power Armor set. As you can see, he's got some real nice details here. We've got the chain collar, all the armor plates, all his fur. The base is pretty cool. It's like I think it's supposed to be like a pier or something. It's got, wood planks, some corrugated metal, and then the really cool part is we got a little teddy bear here that we're gonna have to paint. Which in Fallout 4 is funny because Dogmeat will randomly pull out a teddy bear and play with it. So we're gonna go ahead and start him up. For what we're gonna do is contrast paints for at least the fur. And then I may just switch over to regular metallics for the plates and more contrast for the bindings. Now, I studied the model a little bit, so we're going to be applying mostly dark fur around the top, the tips of the ears, and the muzzle, coming down all around the top of the hindquarters and the top of the tail. Then we'll be using a lighter brown along the rest of it, and then a super light for the belly. So that should pretty closely match the Fallout 4 scheme. A lot of where there's light mixed in on the sides with dark, it's underneath the plates, so we don't have to worry about that. So for the initial dark fur, I'm using contrast Gore Grunta fur. Normally I use this for wood, but it also, of my 4 paints that I have, I think looked the best. So as I said, we're going to kind of hit the muzzle here, coming up to the nose, and just the front part, the bottom muzzle. What we're going to do is try and paint this fast enough to do some blending. So here, along the top especially, we want to make sure we're getting in. Kind of coming down a bit. Kind of running along the top. And just kind of get in the gaps along the top of the armor here. And then in this gap of the plate, and just along the top of this hind leg and around to the tip of the tail. And just kind of mirror on this side a little bit. Just in these top sections here. Alright, then real quickly, we're gonna swap over to Skeleton Horde. Before it dries too much. Of course, Skeleton Horde being the one that constantly gives me problems with staying open. Alright, and then we're going to come around here. Get the ears a bit. wanted to. That's okay. It's all about how it stacks up. Blend this in there. So it is going to give us a little bit of a different shade. And just a little bit along the line here. Let's go ahead and get that around the tops of the leg. And we're just going to kind of hit the front of the paws a bit. Okay. Now, in order to assist with speeding this along while everything's still wet, I knew I wanted to lighten the skeleton horde. So I pre-mixed the skeleton horde and some contrast medium. So, let's see. That's a good pale bit, but it's not blending very well. So what I'm going to do is apply this all heavily real quick. And then see if I can't do some blending after the fact. You'll also see I'm not being careful at all with the plates, and that's just because I know I'm going to go back over them anyway. Because if I decide to do contrast for the plates, then I'm going to need to make them gray. So I'm not going to worry about it. Alright, so pretty much just painting over the whole thing at this point to kind of get this lighter shade mixed in everywhere. Alright. Then what I'm going to do is take my skeleton horde and add a couple drops in to the mix I already had to darken it a little. And then we'll take this and just try and work it in. See if we can get some darker along there. Doesn't seem to be doing too good of a deal. So let's darken it a bit more. especially on the tail here. There we go. That will help blend it in. So now we're just really hitting the spots where the light and dark come together. Just trying to apply that. Okay, let's see. Applying that darker shade up into the even darker part can help blur between the two. There we go, make sure we get all that fur. Legs are looking good. That's an armor plate. Alright, so got our base colors there. That's pretty much how I wanted it to go. Especially on the hind leg there. It's still shiny because it's wet, but you can see the transition of colors. May want to apply a bit at the base here. Help with the transition of the darker colors I put in front of the paw. Alright, so we'll let that dry, and then we'll sort out the mouth and armor plates. Okay, so as you can see, we've dried. Color looking actually pretty good. Everything kind of blended well. And I've also gone ahead and applied my gray primer to the armor plates. So our next piece is going to be to just go ahead and apply Bassilicanum gray to those plates and see how it looks. A little too much. We're just going to get in there. All of this applied. This chain collar as well. We'll go back after and hit all of the leather straps as well. Let's get his chest plate. Just kind of avoiding the stitching parts because we can tap that with a bit of Snakebite Leather once we're done. Other side. The handle up. All right. And the butt plate. And finish up this other side. Okay. All right, and then look for any other spots I need to hit. All right. So our last bit that will be on the actual, well, second to last, well, actual last. Now we're going to do the second to last. But the last bit will be doing the Snakebite Leather for all the straps. First, we're going to do some Black Templars for the snoot. We're going to boop the snoot. And we do also need to do the mouth a little. So we're just gonna boop the snoot. There we go. The snoot is booped. And then we're going to do Flesh Terrors red. Just a little bit in the mouth, which may be a little tricky. Really, I should have let off with the mouth before doing anything else, because that would have made it a lot easier to fix any mistakes. That kind of hit the tongue there, roof of the mouth, and then other side of the tongue. And there we have the pupper. We left enough white in the mouth for teeth. We've got the red of the tongue. So all of that's looking pretty good. I think there's a bit more gray I can apply. I'm going to let it all dry and then maybe hit a second coat depending, and then we will come back to finish up the straps. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and take some Snakebite Leather and we're going to hit all of the strapping and connecting points. So we're just going to kind of start from the front and work our way back. So there is an under the chin strap. So just hit that a little. So I kind of painted over it. There's this little strap between these two pieces. And then the first big one. Come around. We start with this kind of collection of straps. Then along the top, we're just going to hit that. And start hitting these binders. Make sure we're getting into the grooves. And there's a belly strap there. One there. And a big one right there. More bindings. And we want to hit our handle. this little nook there. Let's start on this side. Bindings there. Big strips here. And this is why it was important to me to not use this shade on any of the fur, because I wanted this to stand out so we can see the darker color definitely does not match any of the fur. Alright, so we are pretty much done there as far as just the basics. So what I'm going to do now is apply some rust wash. I'm going to use my older older brush for this. So I use Vellejo Model Wash for rust effects. This is a dark rust. I'm going to use the regular rust on this. A little lighter. This stuff tends to be a little sticky once it's dried, so I always save it to the last to apply. And I also use an older brush on it, just in case any residue remains. But it's very good for the effect. So we're just going to apply it. Onto the plates. I'm not going to apply it to the chain. I want the chain to stand out a little differently. But as this is a wash, it's very liquid. It'll flow into any of the gaps. It doesn't take too much of it. Almost forgot the chest plate. Alright. So I'm going to do the base now. Since these are planks, I'm going to do Gore Grunta fur on those. That's kind of the standard I use for my wood. Now this may wind up being a little similar to Dogmeat's fur, but I'll also be doing a brown wash over the base as opposed to no brown wash on the dog, so that will help differentiate the two. Plus Dogmeat is all browns and the darker colors are towards the top, so that should help. It's definitely a different base than the other ones I've been working on. Mostly we've seen NCR recently. So everything's been kind of deserty. This is one of the only ones I've seen that's this planking. Could just supposed to be the inside of a building, but I like to think it's a wharf or something like that. For anyone who's played Fallout 4, we know there is a lot of dock area. And especially with these planks, this contrast paint is great. Because as you can see, it's... Oops, focus went off. There we go. As we can see, it sits down into all of these recesses. And really highlights all of the wood grain detail that they've done on the base, which, if you look at it, is a gorgeous amount of detail. Now when I do the wash, it'll also do the same thing. So you can always do the base entirely with normal colors. I just prefer to use the contrast for the wood because I use it for the wood for everything. And I like to tie all of my models together with the same schemes like that. Alright, so then we've got kind of dirt rubble. I'll do that in my usual dirt colors. Corrugated metal. So break out the metal for that. So my Towelite Ochre for the dirt. And my P3 cold steel for my metal. Alright, tracking focus working for a change. And again, we're going from lowest point to highest point. So some of this dirt is on top of the metal. So we're just doing the metal first. And we have to be careful, we kind of picked up. This is why I let the paints dry a bit usually. Picked up a bit of the brown. Won't be a huge deal because we're going to rust wash the metal as well. Okay. That's good for that. The other thing I'm going to want is a suitable teddy bear color. So I believe a nice light brown, leather brown for that. But we'll do the light ochre next. This on here. And these colors, since I'm using the same color that I use for all of my kind of dirt, this even will help to bring this particular model in line with some of the NCR releases so they don't look massively out of place next to each other. And that's what we want. We want things to kind of blend. They're going to have their differences, obviously, and the bases don't always, they're not going to match every battlefield you're playing on. But at least your army has, some points bringing it together. This area. Dirt here. Okay. Now around and around the teddy bear. That one leg looks so weird because it's popped up at an angle. There we go. Okay, get into the bear's armpit. I'm not overly concerned about getting paint on the bear because I'm just going to go over it. Okay, looking good. Leather brown. Oop. That's nice and runny. Won't have to add any water to that. Oop. Picked up a hair. Go. Wonder which kitty cat that came from. Oh yeah, you're a good Mr. Bear color. Try and isolate this symbol a bit and decide on a color. And he's got a bandana, a child's bandana wrapped around his leg. So we'll give that its own color as well. Sometimes giving detail to a small piece of what would otherwise be rather innocuous, trash can really help define your model. And then Mr. Bear here has a tear in his arm. So we will color that a little differently too. Okay. I'm going to do some red for the bandana that's on the bear's leg. To be nice and careful. There we go. Just a little pop of color. And then for this little swooshy symbol, it reminds me of a Star Trek logo. So we're going to do some Iyanden yellow on it. Ooh, that's too much. It's the only problem when dealing with contrast paints. You can get way too much. But so we just dried our brush, and we're going to use it as a siphon. See how that just, hopefully it can, yeah, it just siphoned it right off, and then we can redistribute it where we wanted it. And since it was over brown, it won't show up for any problems. It may have actually supposed to have been a tear, but I like to think it's like a little logo or something on him. Teddy has enough problems with his arm. He doesn't need it in his chest, too. Alright, and then, wrong thing, for the tear itself, just going to use some contrast apothecary white to apply some definition to it, since we did base it white. Okay, Mr. Bear. There we go. Alright, Mr. Bear is looking fabulous. And the metal has had enough time to dry, and our rust effect is still liquid. So we're going to take that, not as much as that, and apply it to the corrugated metal. Alright, so now we need to wait for the rust effect to dry, and then I'm going to brown wash the base, and we'll be ready for sealing. And then again, this base, much like some of the previous ones I've done, there's so much going on, I don't feel the need to add any tufts to it. Once I get the wash on top, it'll pick out all of the definition quite nicely, and we can call it done. Okay, so as we can see, everything's dried up nicely, so we can go ahead and apply our brown wash now to pick up those details. So this is just my usual Agrax Earthshade. So we're going to apply it fairly liberally. Not quite so on the metal. We still want some of it on there. I want to make sure that for the metal the rust color is coming through. But that we're not overwhelming it. Okay, drag this down. A couple spots on there. There we go. Now, for Teddy, we're going to be a little more careful about applying it because we don't want to overwhelm any of the details on him. But we do want to make sure that we're especially getting like his face and his arms and stuff so we can pick up those seam work. Okay. Alright, so we're going to let this dry, gray the ring, and then seal, and we're done. Alright, so we are all done. Dogmeat here has been sealed and ready to go. All the armor is nicely weathered. All of his details are picked out. I'm happy with how the fur came out. Got some nice tonal shifts. Teddy there, looking good. So, all in all, very nicely done, I think. And he'll look awesome running next to some survivors. Now, just for comparison... Oh, there we go, losing the focus. Let's get that back. Here's one that I did years ago. This non-contrast and very basic, and you can see this is also this one is the softer. Oh no, actually, yeah, no, this is the softer plastic as opposed to resin. Is it? No, this is a resin one. Which means, is it? Let's see. Yeah, that's a resin one. Okay. Anyway, no, actually, no. This is the plastic. That's why it's deformed on the side. I thought it was from a trim, but that's just a deformation. Yeah, so it doesn't have quite as much detail, especially on the base, as the normal one would. But you can see that they still kind of match. But since I did this one at least 2 years ago, I think, compared to this, there's definitely some improvements in techniques. So what I wanted to show this was so that you can see, everyone improves over time. It just takes actually doing it. So just, pick up a brush, force yourself to paint. Even if it doesn't come out good, the more you do it, the better you're going to get. I also just want to say thanks for getting me to 100 subscribers. This has just been something fun to kind of keep me sane through COVID, and I'm kind of enjoying it. It's also helping me focus on actually getting models painted. So I'm going to keep at it, obviously. I've been looking at maybe doing some channel branding and stuff like that, but that's a bit further down the road. But yeah, thanks everyone. I may also just go ahead and do a video here showing off kind of my work area and all of that if people are interested. But yeah, so leave any comments you like as far as what to paint next, or and if no one has any suggestions, I'll go ahead and probably just work on the NCR heavies next, I think. Since those are pretty interesting, and I'll be painting those using normal paints instead of contrast. Alright, well, thanks everyone, and enjoy your Fallout Friday.